Thank you. It's actually a great pleasure to be here at AXA. And I'm Petra Klepac. I have a PhD in mathematical biology, and I use tools, mathematical tools, to study infectious diseases and try to find ways how can we improve our control strategies. And I promise this picture is not to induce panic and try to get you to evacuate. No children will be harmed in this talk. But the truth is, most of us perceive vaccines and needles as something very scary. Like a lot of people said when they saw this photo, ooh, that's nasty. And I would like you to kind of try to change your attitude towards it during this talk, if I can convince you that vaccines are actually a great thing, a very good thing, and a very powerful public health tool. In fact, we can do much more. What is really needed today is international aspect of disease control. So this is where I come in. It turns out that my research also suffers from questions of ethics, like Nikolai's research. It is not ethical to experiment with children. We cannot test out, oh, this strategy might be a good one, let's try if it works, and then if it fails, it's a disaster. So we use mathematical models because they allow us to compare thousands of strategies very efficiently by using computer simulations, and then we can identify the best one. So infectious diseases have many similarities with fire. Right? Just as you need right conditions for fire to spread, you need the right temperature, humidity, you need to have enough dry wood to start the fire and for the fire to spread. You also need right conditions for infectious diseases to spread. You need to have contact between people, but more importantly, you need to have enough susceptibles. Right? So the susceptibles, people who haven't been vaccinated, people who are not immune to infections, are the wood that fuels these outbreaks. So if I sneeze on you and you're vaccinated, you will not get infected. That's a good thing, right? So very much like we are trying to build fire corridors, like we are trying to clear out wood in forests to contain fires and prevent them from spreading from one place to another. What we're trying to do is, with infectious diseases, is try to find optimal ways of vaccinating populations in order to prevent the spread. So if we have simple models, they're already powerful tools because they can tell us exactly how many people we need to vaccinate. So for example, polio, I hope most of us have been vaccinated against polio. It's a very transmissible disease. It's also a very severe disease. People don't want to get paralyzed. So vaccinations are very common for polio. But it turns out in order to eliminate polio, you need to vaccinate 85% of the population. And that's a lot, right? Some people are harder to get to than others. Some are in really remote locations. And this is why polio proves to be a very hard disease to eliminate globally. So there are still 3 countries in the world with polio. That's Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. India has recently been free of polio, and that's really, really fantastic news. Flu, on the other hand, doesn't spread that well. On average, you infect 2 other people, so it's much easier to control, and this is why you need to vaccinate less than 50% of the population to prevent the spread of flu. Much easier to achieve. We can also use models to identify super spreaders. So in terms of SARS, I think everybody remembers the panic of SARS when the disease spread from Hong Kong to China to Europe. The people were very heterogeneous, like very much the same in Nikolai's work. Not everybody is the same. On average, people infected 2-3 other people. But then there were individuals who infected more than 20 others. So these are the super spreaders. And if you identify them, if you can target super spreaders, you can contain diseases much faster with less vaccinations. But just like a spark and wind can spread fire from one location to another, human travel can spread disease around the planet very effectively. And this is our air travel over a year. And you can see that globalization makes the world really, really global. So from a pathogen perspective, this is their market, right? Pathogens know no borders. Disease is very easily spread from one location to another. And that introduces this high human mobility introduces new risks for infectious diseases, and it also introduces new challenges for their control. But from another point of view, globalization introduces us new opportunities, because if we take this international point of view, so if this is what we are trying to deal with, it's the world, we can do much better. So what is the main point here? What's the problem? Well, the problem is that diseases are still controlled on a national level. Countries decide on their own what are they going to do, what is their strategy going to be, what disease are they going to focus on, what are they going to target, who are they going to vaccinate. There is no international government that will impose a uniform or unify vaccination strategy. So World Health Organization can issue guidelines, but they cannot make countries follow those guidelines. So it's really hard to get people to agree and to cooperate. So my recent research focuses on introducing international agreements to mathematical models and see if we can get countries to cooperate without this international government that doesn't exist. And what we find is that cooperation is really crucial on many levels. So first we have the individual levels. We need individuals to get vaccinated. And vaccination is usually not a mandatory thing in many countries. We cannot say people, you need to get vaccinated. We try to do that, right? We say you cannot put your children in school unless they're vaccinated against rubella, measles, mumps, certain childhood diseases. But usually in most of the countries, people decide on their own whether or not to get vaccinated. If too many people refuse vaccinations, there is too much dry wood that can spark the epidemic at any time. On a national level, decisions are a little bit different. So country here is balancing their interest in population health against the costs of providing that health, so against the cost of care, but also cost of both direct and indirect costs of infection. So certain diseases are very severe. Smallpox, variole, was very bad. I mean, it was a disease so horrible that people had goddesses and divinities dedicated to smallpox, and that was the only disease that has goddesses. But luckily, we eradicated that. But something like smallpox is very severe. That's going to be perceived as very costly. So what countries trying to balance is this population interest in public health against the cost that it needs to invest to control the disease. So depending on the socioeconomic level of each country, their optimal control can vary anywhere from no intervention to wanting to eliminate the disease. And this is a huge range, right? And what causes a problem when you have neighboring countries with very different strategies, and this is often the case. So in polio, to stick with polio as an example, the world is trying to eliminate polio, but Nigeria in 2003 had a health scare. They stopped vaccinating, and the polio spread to 13 surrounding countries that were previously free of polio. They managed to eliminate, but because Nigeria, their neighbor or their country in the vicinity of them, stopped vaccinating, polio spread, and all of a sudden you have a huge problem. So what do you do if you want to eliminate something and your neighbor doesn't? Do you keep your resources to yourself? Do you share it with the neighbor? So our intuition, so the kind of classic knowledge is you should invest locally. If you have the resources, you should focus on your population. Well, actually, models can teach us something else. It's in our interest to share it with their neighbor, because unless we help them, they cannot eliminate, and then we have all the incoming infections from them, and they're preventing us from eliminating. So the same idea happens on a global level. So this is the world, and if my current AXA research shows that if you scale it up from 2 countries to entire region, and if countries can form coalitions, I have showed that you can achieve much better coverage, surprisingly at a lower cost, than if countries are acting independently. And this is important because it provides us hope that there is room for improvement in the way we control infectious diseases, and that maybe we can get to elimination more efficiently if we pull the resources together. Thank you very much.
Yes, I was wondering because a few weeks ago there was this man who came from Dubai. I don't know if you heard about it. He came to France and he actually eventually died of the disease he caught in Dubai, and he transmitted it to a few people. And so, what do you do? I mean, do you stop the guy at the airport? I mean, you know, can there be more controls or, you know?
That's another excellent question. People ask that a lot. So this is the case of a new coronavirus, and it's in the same group that SARS was, and this is why it's very worrisome. It's still not spreading from human to human fast enough for people to be alerted. So stopping travel, yes, that could be very effective, but it's extremely expensive. Shutting down airports, cities, that's very costly. Another problem with what kind of measures can you implement before you have a problem is that in case of SARS and in case of new emerging diseases, you're trying to learn about the disease as time progresses. So in case you're showing symptoms right away, you know that, okay, we have a problem, this person is sick, we're not letting him on a plane because he's sneezing, coughing, has temperature. Those are kind of easy to detect, and quarantining them, removing them from contact with other people would be very effective. But in many cases, like for example in flu, you are infectious without showing any symptoms in the beginning, right? So you had this asymptomatic phase where the contagion happens. And that is more problematic because that means that people travel while you don't know that they are infected. So by the time you implement the measure and say, okay, we're shutting down the airports, it's too late because that person has already went from Dubai to France and is here, yeah.